Holly, looking at this reverse angle video, seeing what took place behind the car, what does it tell you?
I see that this gentleman is resisting arrest. And from what I understand, that is not a death sentence. And what's very, very clear to me is I agree with Michael here that Mr. Blake is walking away from the police. And it's very clear to me in this angle that we're seeing today that he is resisting that arrest and that he's not complying with the officer. And the biggest problem I had with what the police officers did that day was that they basically shot him 7 times in the back for not complying with their requests. And that to me is the real heart of the matter, is that what does a police officer do with non-compliance? I understand he might have been tased. I understand that he was not going into custody very easily, but it's my understanding that police also have protocols whereby they can put hands on a person who's resisting arrest before shooting him in the back.
Absolutely. Let's take a listen now to the Attorney General from Wisconsin, who spoke and gave us a little bit more information. Some information, from my perspective, not enough context to all of it, but let's take a listen.
During the incident, officers attempted to arrest Jacob S. Blake, age 29. Law enforcement deployed a taser to attempt to stop Mr. Blake, but the taser was not successful in stopping him. Mr. Blake walked around his vehicle, opened the driver's side door, and leaned forward. While holding on to Mr. Blake's shirt, Officer Rustin Shesky fired his service weapon 7 times. Officer Shesky fired the weapon into Mr. Blake's back. No other officer fired their weapon. The Kenosha Police Department does not have body cameras, and therefore the officers were not wearing body cameras. During the investigation following the initial incident, Mr. Blake admitted that he had a knife in his possession, and DCI agents, that's the Division of Criminal Investigation, recovered a knife from the driver's side floorboard of Mr. Blake's vehicle. A search of the vehicle located no additional weapons.
All right, he's giving us information, but to me it's raising more questions that I have. And again, we're in an age where there's reactions to these things and people get information, and there's just a lack of complete transparency or slow transparency. And I think we're living in an old-fashioned world. I mean, we need to catch up with what's happening in cities and in our nation. But let me start here with the knife. The questions I have, Michael, about the knife are, all right, during the investigation, he admitted he had possession of a knife. Well, when did he have the knife? Where did he have the knife? Did the officers that were there even know that he had a knife? The knife was recovered in the floorboard. Okay, great. But was it there before the struggle? Was it there after the struggle? Did he reach for the knife? I have so many questions that are left unanswered. I'm sure the rest of America has tons of questions, Michael.
I mean, Vinny, yes, I have a lot of questions too. And to be candid, it doesn't matter. Officers, you're supposed to use deadly force as the last possible alternative. When there's no other choice left, that's when you're supposed to use deadly force. And what we keep seeing, and part of the issue that keeps being raised, is that it should not be a death sentence for you to walk away from a police officer. Even if you're doing something wrong, the officers don't get to be the judge, the jury, and the executioner. So I can be the McCloskeys and walk out on my front porch and point a rifle at innocent protesters. I can be Kyle Rittenhouse, and I can walk down the street after murdering 2 people and raise my arms, surrendering myself to police, and be given a glass of water, right? But I can't be a black man walking to my car without being shot in the back 7 times simply because I resisted arrest. And it's difficult, Vinny, for people to keep trying to deny this truth. And that truth is that it is dangerous to be a black man and to do something that is, even just slightly untoward in the presence of a police officer, lest you find yourself on the wrong end of their gun.
And how important are the answers to the questions regarding the knife? Like, where was it? Who knew about it? And did the officers there know about it? Did they see it? Did they talk? I mean, I have tons of questions that haven't been answered.
Right. Those are all excellent questions. And the fact is, they can only use deadly force when threatened with deadly force, or others are threatened with deadly force. They're protecting themselves or others. So, I mean, that's axiomatic, with police use of force. No, they can't shoot him just because he had a knife in the dashboard or under the seat or anywhere else. If they didn't see it and they weren't threatened with it in any way, then it's completely immaterial. So it's in the car. I mean, they didn't know about it. And if it wasn't in any way brandished at them, then it's irrelevant. The other part of it is so rare to have a case where there's a justified shooting where someone's shot in the back, period. Whether it's 7 times, whether it's 1 time, whether it's 2 times. I've only had 1, and I've handled probably 40 officer-involved shootings, the trials, the inquests, all of it, gone to the scene, everything else. And I had 1 officer that shot somebody when it was icy, and they were slipping down a hillside and shot, and it ended up in his back. But that's so rare that when you look at this, how can you justify 7 times in the back on these facts or on any facts?
All right, Holly, let me ask you, if the answer to the question about the knife is that it was in his hand, does that change anything? If the answer to the question about the knife was he was reaching for it when he opened the door and the officer saw him reach for the knife, does that change anything if that's the answer?
Only slightly, Vinny. I think that if that were the case, if he was reaching for a knife, I second what Ann says. In rare circumstances, is it ever okay or following the protocol of the police department for someone to be shot in the back? It's my understanding, and I believe several police officers have commented on this online, that in order to shoot someone in the back, you have to be preventing a serious injury to others. Like you would want to shoot someone in the back who is raising an axe and running into a crowd is a example that I've heard. And I don't think that happened at all. And in fact, I think there's a lot of information in what the Attorney General clip just told us. And it's almost as if we had that video that you showed us and we stopped it and we did a still frame. The facts are very clear. Mr. Blake was unarmed. The police officer was pulling at his t-shirt and then the shots were fired. For me, that's all you need to know. He was unarmed. He did not have that knife. There was no threat to others. And that officer shot him in the back while he was holding his t-shirt instead of following about 6 or 7 other maneuvers you can do to a person that is resisting arrest. And I believe resisting arrest is a misdemeanor in many states.
And Vinny, we haven't even
Michael
talked
Sterling,
about
let me
the
ask you a
fact.
final question here. Michael, let me just put one more
Sure.
question at you, because this is what people are going to be talking about, and I'm curious about the answer. If he opens the door, leans in, and is reaching for the knife, the officer can't use deadly force?
Absolutely not, Vinny. I mean, Vinny, no, the officer is not at that point. The officer still cannot use deadly force. I mean, what is the threat? Is he afraid at that point that he's going to use deadly force against him? Has he even attempted to use deadly force against the officer? Can the officer not back up? Is there not another alternative for the officer to secure himself and others? He's not using the knife against anyone.
Michael, are you arguing that the officer has a duty to retreat at that moment? He's trying to arrest someone, and that person is reaching for a knife, and at that point, once he's reaching for the knife, the officer has to retreat?
I'm not saying he has a duty to retreat, Vinny, but he certainly has a duty to not use deadly force only as the last alternative, only at the point where he believes his life or the lives of others are in danger. And Vinny, the point I was going to make earlier is that we haven't even mentioned the point that there are 3 little children in that car. There were 3 little kids in that car who saw their father get shot in the back 7 times, right? And there were all these civilians around. And so this officer is not only creating a danger, it not only shot him in the back, but he created a dangerous situation for 3 little children and all of those other civilians who were around, when there were other alternatives that he could have used before he used deadly force, before he shot his weapon 7 times.
And let me ask you one more question here. I know I'm going overtime here on this segment, but if the officer is trying to arrest someone and that person is getting away and they're getting into a car with kids, should the officers allow that person to drive away with the 3 kids in the car?
Well, no. I mean, the fact is they could be endangered and a vehicle is a weapon. But can they shoot them? No. I mean, remember the days of Tennessee versus
All right,
Garner?
what
It was
do
back
they
in
do?
the 60s where you could.
The
Shoot their
obvious follow-up
tires.
then is, okay, what do you do? Shoot. Okay, I'm looking for alternatives here. Shoot the tires.
How about spikes?
What
You get spikes.
if the man you're trying to arrest? What if the man you're trying to arrest has a knife and is in a car with kids? What are you supposed to do?
Well, that's a tougher question, Vinny. I mean, the fact of the matter is you're going to try and do everything you can do to stop that car. I mean, is he driving recklessly? Is he brandishing the knife in a way that you're worried the kids may get killed? Then you're looking at a potential deadly force situation, absolutely. But it's really so fact-specific. You can't let him go. But if he's brandishing the knife, you think he's going to hurt the kids, then you've got to save those kids. And it's a split-second decision.
Vinny, what did they do to Kyle Rittenhouse? Yeah. Right? What did they do to him? They let him go home and they arrested him later. And he had an assault rifle and he murdered 2 people. I mean, that's what you do. Treat him the same way.
And I also understand that police officers can tackle. I mean, there was more than one police officer there. And so my understanding of their training is that when you see a person resisting arrest, you go and you help that arresting officer. But instead, everyone was just standing around. I mean, there are literally 5 other things a police officer can do before shooting someone as they're walking away from them. This is about what does a police officer do when someone's resisting arrest. I think there needs to be more training, and I'm shocked there's no body cams or dashboard cams in that town in Wisconsin. And I think that's a real problem.
Yeah. And that gets back to my number one point for this whole thing. Transparency is the key right now. Transparency in all of these cases. A great discussion. Everyone's coming back. We've got another story to get to. We got news out of Idaho tonight, Fremont, Idaho, and involves the